Hi everyone, how are you all? So in the last video I talked about the social conditions that historically precede political breakdown. So those things include rising inequality, economic insecurity, a loss of status, and ultimately the most important thing is fear of losing all of those things, and how to manage in this new and changing environment that people are finding themselves in. So in this video, I want to take the next step and ask a harder question. And that question is, how does authoritarianism actually take hold? And why do so many people fail to see it happening? And it's because authoritarianism today doesn't arrive with tanks in the streets. It arrives quietly, procedurally, often legally, and very often with public consent, like we're seeing today. So, we tend to imagine authoritarianism as something obvious, like a coup, a wicked dictator that's kind of cartoonish and terrifying, or a clear rupture in the social fabric. But political scientists and historians are clear on this point, that modern authoritarianism almost never begins the way that we think it did, and the way it has historically. So instead today it emerges through the gradual erosion of norms, that institutional bending rather than breaking, emergency powers that never quite end, loyalty replacing competence, and this constant crisis framing that we're at risk, we're in danger, we're under attack by immigrants. These kinds of narratives. This is how authoritarianism begins in modern society. So Hannah Arendt warned that the most dangerous moment isn't when laws are broken, but it's when breaking them becomes normal. So we only need to look at the Trump administration that is breaking a new law on a daily basis. That this is normalized. When this becomes normalized, this is when we see this emergence of authoritarianism. And by the time people realize it, that something fundamental has changed in society, the mechanisms to resist it are already weakened. So here's the critical link back to the previous video. Authoritarianism doesn't grow primarily because people become cruel and nasty, or they become extreme and radicalized in their politics. It grows because people become scared and exhausted. So when living costs are rising, people's status is declining, your future feels really uncertain, and institutions feel distant or hostile, people don't ask for freedom. They're asking for certainty in these kinds of uncertain times. And authoritarian movements are very good at offering that kind of certainty. So they present to you in really simple ways our clear enemies. They give us simple explanations. They provide for us strong leaders, and I'm going to say strong in inverted commas there. They appear strong to the demographic that they're appealing to, and they give us moral clarity. So this is the right thing to do. We're doing something for our society and for our nation. And as political scientists Levitsky and Ziblatt show, democracies rarely collapse from external attack. They decay from internal stress. And that fear that I was talking about in the last video, it kind of makes these trade-offs feel reasonable and the right thing to do. So if somebody can just make all of this stop, all this craziness, maybe following those kinds of people is worth it. But I'm here to tell you that it's probably not. So one of the biggest mistakes that we make is treating authoritarianism as a personality problem. So it means that we're looking for bad leaders, dangerous individuals and monsters. And like I was saying before, that kind of caricatures the leaders that are ultimately becoming authoritarian dictators, like Trump. He didn't seem dangerous. He just seemed kind of funny at first, didn't he? He was funny, and he said silly things, and he was exciting for the crowds. But he wasn't the kind of dangerous monster that we were looking for. So authoritarianism is better understood if we think of it more as a systemic process. So it shows up as attacks on independent institutions, undermining people's expertise, so putting people into positions that they're wholly unqualified for, reframing dissent as disloyalty. We see that on a daily basis with Trump getting cross with a different person every week because they're disloyal, according to him. Redefining truth as partisan. So truth no longer exists in his vocabulary. It's whatever he thinks at the time. And normalizing exceptional measures. So normalizing these kind of Gestapo soldiers that are infiltrating cities all over America to find these, how they're framing it, these monster immigrants that are murdering people on the streets, which is obviously rubbish. So crucially, many of these steps are justified as temporary, necessary, or protective. And this is why authoritarianism often advances without mass resistance. It doesn't feel like tyranny when it's happening. It feels like they're creating order, and I'm sure that's how the MAGA supporters feel right now, that he's creating order and chaos. It's just the rest of the people that can see it for what it is. So why do we sometimes miss it? Why don't we always see it? And there's 3 reasons. So the first one, it's incremental. Each step feels survivable, adjustable, and not worth creating too much fuss about. And second, it's moralized. So opposition is framed as selfish, dangerous, or immoral, not political. So think back to COVID. When people were being accused of being selfish and dangerous if they didn't want the COVID vaccine. And I think with hindsight, we got wrapped up into this framing opposition as something that was selfish and dangerous. And maybe, perhaps, with hindsight, we might have been a bit hasty with those types of rhetoric. So third, it exploits polarization. When society's split, people tolerate abuses as long as they hurt the other side. So as long as we're abusing the left in Trump's government, then that's all right. So Timothy Snyder puts it bluntly: authoritarianism thrives when people stop defending institutions they don't like. And once trust collapses, truth becomes optional. So this stuff matters. Authoritarianism isn't owned by any ideology. It can wear nationalist language, revolutionary language, moral language, security language. What matters is not the rhetoric, but whether power becomes unaccountable. And this brings us back to the core warning of this series. When material insecurity meets polarization, people become vulnerable to anyone who promises control. We're vulnerable right now. Our society in Ireland, our society in the UK, we're vulnerable to somebody as equally terrifying as we've ended up with in America. So just keep an eye out for one another. So finally then, authoritarianism, it doesn't begin with violence. It begins fundamentally with this fear that I've been talking about. It starts with exhaustion and that quiet acceptance of having to accept trade-offs to feel secure. If we want to resist it, we need to stop asking who is dangerous and start asking what conditions make danger attractive. So in the next video, I'm going to zoom out even further and look at what happens when these internal pressures start breaking the international rules that once kept the world relatively stable. So something very prominent at the minute now, all of these international rules are being smashed to bits by America's latest orange dictator. Because it's important to cover this, because when norms collapse globally, there's no outside referee left. We're in a situation now, it's of complete uncertainty. So rather than being a voice screaming to stop this, I'm not one of those kind of political speakers here. I'm ultimately a sociologist. I'd like to really commit myself here to the calm collaboration between all of us, that society does need to change, the political system needs to change, but we need to do that together for our collaborative interests, for everybody's interests, not just billionaires that have been controlling the world. Okay, thanks guys, and we'll see you next time.